committee for inviting me to join this summer school on a critical and important topic. I would like to extend also the thanks of my director at the Volos Academy, and also the Metropolitan, the Bishop of our diocese in Volos. So I will share my screen, the PowerPoint presentation that my lecture will be based.
Yeah, fine.
So what I'm trying to do in this afternoon is, first of all, to provide some general theoretical, let's say, understanding of what is climate crisis, what is ecotheology, and related topics. Then I will move to see the connection and the relationship between war in general, but war also in Ukraine, in the context of climate crisis. And then I will try to perhaps to share with you some ideas, some proposals of how in the future, in the immediate future, how we can green our churches, our parishes. So you can see here an image from an utopic future, perhaps also a present reality. It's actually a mushroom cloud. It is a bomb test at Bikini Atoll, taking place in the United States somewhere after the World War II. But this actually, this image perhaps presents in front of us a very difficult, perhaps, future. Let's start with a look at history, from the past to the present of the climate crisis. Lynn White Jr., perhaps you have heard again this name. He's an American scholar, scientist, back in the 60s, wrote a very prolific and very prophetic article. Can be described as the prophet of climate crisis. But we can start even earlier with philosophers, well-known philosophers, Francis Bacon, Immanuel Kant, René Descartes. All those philosophers, and especially René Descartes, cogito ergo sum, it is a famous phrase that a human being is the lord and possessor of nature. All these philosophies, one way or another, led to the gradual disassociation of humanity from the materiality of the world. Overexploitation and overconsumption of natural resources, extreme self-referent and narcissistic interpretation of the biblical narrative of Genesis, all this kind of stuff led to the today problem of environmental crisis. Lynn White wrote an article that has been published in magazine Science in 1967, where he describes in his terms the coming situation, the coming reality. According to his own words, I quote here some part of his article. The emergence in widespread practice of the Baconian grid that scientific knowledge means technological power over nature mark the greatest event in human history since the invention of agriculture. A strong, I would say, phrase, but represents the reality that we face today, that technological power over nature is our, let's say, credo in our days. Man's relation to the soil was profoundly changed. Formerly, man had been part of nature. Now he was the exploiter of nature. What people do about their ecology depends on what they think about themselves in relation to things around them, both human beings, but also not human beings. Human ecology is deeply conditioned by religion, a very important statement by Lynn White, who was not a religious person at all, but he realizes that he understands the importance of spirituality, religion on the matter of climate crisis. In its Western form, Christianity is the most anthropocentric religion. He is critical against Christianity, especially Western Christianity. In ambiguity, every tree, every spring, every stream, every hill had its own genius loci, its guardian spirit. By destroying pagan animism, Christianity made it possible to exploit nature in a mood of indifference to the feelings of the natural objects. At the last sentence by Lynn White, the roots of our trouble are so largely religious. The remedy must also be essentially religious. So, Lynn White in this article not only describes a difficult future that is coming in front of us in that days, but he also very strongly connects religion as a let's say a cause, and Christianity in particular as a cause of climate crisis. This is something that we need to keep in mind. Living on Earth in 2050, a grim picture. As reported by the Copernicus Climate Change Service last year, marked a sobering milestone. Average global temperatures rose over 1.5 degrees of Celsius for the first time in history. From January 2024, a grim picture emerges. We remain off track to meet Paris Agreement goals. We will refer to Paris Agreement goals later on. With projected warming now surpassing 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, if emissions continue unabated. The narrow chance remains to correct course by radically transforming global energy systems. Is it what we want or what we are willing to do? I'm not sure. As the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine, not to mention the war between Israel and Hamas, continues to demonstrate the broader implications of climate inaction and fossil fuel dependence, threatening geopolitical, economic, energy, food, and climate security, it looks like we are losing the chance. Ecocide is a new term used by historians, but also sociologists, not only other scientists, coming from the Greek word home and the Latin cadere, to kill, meaning the destruction of the environment by humans. Ecocide threatens all human, but also not human populations who are dependent on natural resources for maintaining ecosystems and ensuring their ability to support future generations. I'm sure that all of you are very well aware of this case study, the destruction of the Kaksova Dam. I don't know if we can see here if the video will play. I will try. Can you see the Wikipedia on your screen? No, I have to stop the sharing and then share again, then other window. Let's give a second, because it's important. Perhaps you are aware already, but it's important to see how a war creates serious problems. So here is from Wikipedia, the video that shows how the situation has changed after the destruction of this dam. We will see later on what were the implications of this destruction. Let's continue the PowerPoint presentation and go to the next slide. This is let's say a short description of what is the meaning of ecocide. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. So ecocide is a term that can describe what we are experiencing today, and especially in the context of war. Let's review, actually, very briefly, some current global, secular, and religious efforts to address climate crisis. Perhaps some of them are already known to you, as the Paris Agreement, 2015, the European Green Deal, 2019, Pope Francis Encyclical Laudato Si, 2016. Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew is considered as the Green Patriarch already in 2008 by the then Vice President of the United States, has been recognized as the Green Patriarch. He is the same Patriarch that in 1997 calls harming the environment as a sin, which is an important spiritual and religious dimension to recognize that the catastrophe of the environment is not, let's say, only, does not have only economical or scientific dimension, but it also has a spiritual dimension. It is a sin against the environment, against the creation of God. The recently convened in Crete, the Holy and Great Synod in 2016, has a special paragraph in the text, in the document, the mission of the Orthodox Church in today's world, dealing with the climate crisis. It also, in 2019, the Archdiocese of America, the Greek Archdiocese of America, issued a very important document called For the Life of the Gold, the Social Teaching of the Orthodox Church, where there is a special section on environment. And also in 2021, there was a joint statement by Pope Francis, Patriarch Bartholomew, and Archbishop of Canterbury, an inter-Christian, actually, statement, where we can read that we call on everyone, whatever their belief or worldview, to endeavor to listen to the cry of the earth and of people who are poor, examining their behavior and pledging meaningful sacrifices for the sake of the earth which God has given us. Let's go in to see some details of these initiatives, both secular and religious, starting with the Paris Agreement, Climate Agreement 2015, where it says that acknowledging that climate change is a common concern of humankind, parties, it means the governments that signed this agreement, should, when taking action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations on human rights, the right to health, the rights of indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people in vulnerable situations, and the right to development, as well as gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. Among the ambitious decisions to be implemented by the agreement in the following years were to, quote again, holding the increase in the global average in temperature to well below 2 degrees of Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and pushing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees of Celsius, above the pre-industrial levels, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. Move forward to the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal seeks to transform our everyday lives to address the critical and timely threat of climate change. In doing so, the European Green Deal suggests certain and deeply transformative policies like modernization of the European economy, supplying clean and affordable energy, mobilizing industry for a clean economy, building in an energy and resource efficient way, and many others. And all of this for a sustainable future, taking into account, at least in principle, this is something important from a theological and religious perspective, to not leave someone behind. The European Green Deal mentions here actually an ethical perspective that is important for us. Some religious initiatives I focus especially on the Holy and Great Council of Crete and the document that has been adopted by the Council. In that document, we can read that the ecological crisis, which is connected to climate change and global warming, makes it incumbent upon the Church to do everything within her spiritual power to protect God's creation from the consequences of human greed. As the gratification of material needs, greed leads to spiritual impoverishment of the human being and to environmental destruction. We'll go direct to the next to take a look at the For the Life of the World document published in 2019. A short quotation: humanity occupies the place of a Methorios, the boundary where the spiritual and material realms meet and are united. Salvation encompasses the whole of the cosmic reality. Its soul will be made perfect only in a renewed creation. The responsibility of Christians in this world, therefore, is in seeking to transfigure the fallen nature in service to the kingdom, involves a real responsibility to the whole of creation and a ceaseless concern for its integrity and flourishing. Again, as you can see, there is an ethical, a moral perspective. This is the foundation and context of the pioneer initiatives of the Ecumenical Patriarchate for the preservation of the natural environment. Let's turn now to define the names, to see what is the meaning of climate crisis, let's say as a term, or what is the meaning of ecotheology and ecology, and how war and climate crisis are connected. So let's set the scene to understand that climate crisis is a global crisis in terms of financial, moral, and existential perspective. Where it takes place? Everywhere, like northwestern Europe, increasing risk of river and coastal flooding, Arctic temperature rise much larger than global average, Mediterranean region, expansion of habitats for southern disease vectors. What is the meaning of climate crisis? Especially the CO2 emissions, but also global warming, large-scale shifts in weather patterns, meat production models, what we are eating actually. We are eating a lot of meat. Biodiversity loss, sea pollution from plastics, mega fires. Here in Greece for the whole June, but also now in the beginning of July, we're experiencing all this period very serious mega fires. Not only this year, but also for the last, let's say, 5-6 years, the situation remains the same. It's getting worse year by year. Why? Who are the causes of this climate crisis? Climate crisis caused by human-induced greenhouse gases in atmosphere. It is clearly anthropocentric factors, like the war. We will see in a bit how war is connected to this. And of course, our consumerist lifestyle. All these can be described by more or less by a new term, the one that I put here, Anthropocene. But what is Anthropocene? What is it and why it matters for climate crisis? The Anthropocene epoch is an unofficial unit of geologic time used to describe the most recent period in Earth's history, when human activity started to have a significant impact on the planet's climate and ecosystems. So it is about the impact of human activity on our planet. That is the meaning of Anthropocene. Officially, in terms of the current science, our epoch is called the Holocene, which began 11,000 years, almost 12,000 years ago after the last major ice age. What about then of Anthropocene? The word Anthropocene is derived from the Greek word, again, anthropos, for man, and sine, for new, coined and made popular by biologist Eugene Stormer and chemist Paul Crutzen in 2000. Scientists still debate whether the Anthropocene is different from the Holocene. According to scientists, the beginning of the Anthropocene should be either the start of Industrial Revolution or the first test of atomic bomb 1945. The picture in the beginning was from that atomic from that test. And of course, war emerges in the time of the climate crisis as one of the major factors of Anthropocene. Here are some diagrams that you can see. Perhaps it's not very clear to see the impact of human activities on various levels and various cases. At some point, I will perhaps after this today's summer school, I can share with you PowerPoint presentation for your convenience. So the impact of war on the environment. It is important to see the connection. The link between wars and climate change has already been the focus of research during the recent years, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. President Zelensky's address at 2022 COP27 focused on this connection through the war's impact. And he highlights some of the impacts of war on the environmental crisis. In general, on the environment, the 2 million hectares of forest destroyed. On energy, the threat of radiation disaster from nuclear plants and the energy crisis that was compelling countries to continue or revert to coal. And C, on food, through the disruption of grain supplies. As you know better than me, Ukraine and Russia together export the 30% of the world's wheat. That is worsening the food crisis already exacerbated by droughts. Let's see in more details the connection between war and climate crisis. A third of the warfare emissions come directly from military activity, with fuel used by Russian army accounting for the single greatest source of greenhouse gases at the moment. Other sources include the manufacturing of carbon-intensive explosives, ammunition, and defense goals along the front lines by both countries, as well as the fuel used by allies to deliver military equipment. Another third is attributed to the vast quantities of steel and concrete that will be needed to reconstruct the damaged and destroyed schools, homes, bridges, and generally infrastructure. Some reconstruction has already taken place, and in some cases, the replaced structures have been destroyed again. The final third was generated by fires, rerouting of commercial planes, strikes on energy infrastructure, and to a lesser extent, the displacement of nearly 7 million Ukrainian people and Russians because of the war. Landscape fires have increased in size and intensity on both sides of the border since the invasion. In the first analysis of its kind, 1 million hectares of scorched fields and forests were linked to military causes, accounting for the 13% of the total carbon cost. But this is the green picture. It has also many other dimensions. Air pollution caused by bombing. For example, in Kiev, the concentration of fine particulate matter on March 19, 2022, it was less than 1 month after the start of Russian, which is actually less than 1 month after the start of Russian invasion, was 27.88 times the World Health Organization recommended guideline, extremely high score. Destruction of fuel storage facilities. During the first 13 months of war, 36 fuel storage facilities were destroyed, including 17 oil depots, thereby generating populants from the burning of, you see how many tons of oil products, and gasoline. Attacks on industrial facilities. These attacks, such as on fertilizer and nitric acid plants, have resulted in release of toxic substances. In addition, movement of military equipment, building destruction, and wildfires further contribute to the increasing of air population. The military operation also cause chemical pollution of freshwater resources directly from dumping of ammunition and war equipment, decomposition of ammunition, and release and leaching of explosive residues, and indirectly from damage to industrial facilities. Groundwater, which meets the 25% of Ukraine's drinking water needs, can be contaminated by leaching of explosive residues, such as perchlorate and nitrate from soil. During war, damage to water infrastructure occurs directly and indirectly as a result of military attacks, despite international conventions that ban attacks on water infrastructure. Soil contamination. Physical disturbances include excavation of tunnels and trenches, compaction by large-scale movements of troops with machinery, and cratering by explosives. Chemical contamination occurs through use of munitions, chemical spills from damage to industrial facilities and waste sites. It leaks and spills of oils and lubricants. Landscape and habitat destruction. Ukraine, as you all know, is part of the Green Heart of Europe, which includes rare steppe ecosystems, coastal wetlands, alpine meadows, unset beach forests, and extensive peatlands. It is home to much of Europe's biodiversity, including numerous plant, animal, and bird species, many of which are rare and endemic. Agricultural lands, which comprise of 69% of Ukraine, hold 25% of the world's Chernozem, a rich, highly fertile type of soil. But you can see also the rest information. It is important to have this information in mind to realize how the war causes, what kind of problems the war causes on the environment. Radiation risks, the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam, as we see earlier. On June 6, 2023, an explosion breached the Nova Kakhovka Dam on the Dnipro River in southern Ukraine, releasing almost 20 billion cubic meters of water. The destruction of this dam has been a major humanitarian and ecological disaster. Rescuers and volunteers evacuated more than 4,000 people, but more than 50 people were killed. Hundreds of thousands of people lost access to safe drinking water. Crops became waterlogged, and much of the 2023 harvest has been destroyed, not to mention how many animals have been killed in that case. I will also refer to the problem of food security related to the war. Reading the first paragraph of this slide. Blocked food shipments in the Black Sea cause hunger and food poverty on the other side of the world. Volatile international prices for food have been another consequence of the war, with far-reaching geostrategic implications. So much so that the World Economic Forum's 2023 Global Risks Report ranked a food supply crisis as one of the world's main threats. Before the invasion, Ukraine was an important cog in the global food system, accounting for 10% of global wheat exports, 13% of barley exports, 15% of corn exports, and so on. 95% of Ukraine grain exports were transported by sea from Ukraine's Black Sea ports, including Kherson, Mariupol, and Odessa, all of which have been blockaded or occupied by Russian forces. So you can see how a war of this scale, war, can affect actually the food security of the whole planet, not only of Europe. So now let's turn to a more theological perspective. What about ecotheology? How we can do ecotheology in this context? What is our task as Orthodox Christians or as Christians in general? From ecotheology to ecotheology, from ecology to ecotheology. The term ecodogmatics is a term that I have myself coined in order to describe a new, let's say, method of doing theology, a new perspective of doing theology. In the remainder of this presentation, I would like to share with you some thoughts on this. So in general, dogmatics or dogmatic theology is the part of theology dealing with the arrangement, a statement, as well as the interpretation of the theoretical truths of faith concerning both God and intra and God and extra. It is considered as the very core of Christian systematic theology in general. Now, ecodogmatics is not a new chapter of dogmatics or even a new discipline. In contrast, by this neologism, it is expressed the need to use ecology as a contextual method of doing theology today in view of the climate crisis. We all face this situation, the climate crisis, the environmental crisis. We need to rethink how can do theology in this context, in a new and very critical context. It is not just about creation theology, that is a specific chapter of dogmatics already existing, but the underlying background, the very methodology that substantiates every single chapter of Christian theology. As a method, ecodogmatics can make use of certain theoretical tools and assumptions of ecology, by which and through which to approach certain Christological, anthropological, sacramental, ecclesiological, and so on aspects of the Christian doctrine. In this respect, creation, ktisis, a biblical term, matter, materiality, sarx, and animality should not be regarded as a peripheral part of theological discourse. On the contrary, it is the very ground through which theologia, doing theology, or logos per theou, has become possible in the person of Christ in history. Otherwise, what we are doing is not theology, but metaphysics, or philosophy, but not theology in the particular Christian sense of the word. Let's see, I mentioned before that we can use some, let's say, terms or tools coming from ecology in this new way, new model of doing theology. And I try to present here very briefly some terms. The movement of material and energy through living communities, which is actually perichoresis, the classic theological term perichoresis, or Trinitarian plane, in order to use a more philosophical term. All the divine Trinitarian persons share in the same divine substance and energy. This is actually the meaning of, this is the first part of this point, of this bullet, is actually actually coming from ecology, the movement of material and energy through living communities. The successional development of ecosystems. What is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, as well as weather and landscapes, work together to form a bubble of life. But we can also use the term ecosystem in the context of the Trinitarian theology, because the divine Trinitarian persons participate in the one common substance, which is the divine life, this divine life includes everything, we can say, in a kind of metaphor. Patterns of biodiversity. Biodiversity is a classic ecological term. Its effects on ecosystem processes can account for personal otherness of Trinitarian persons. And of course, theology, as we all know, is about life and death matters. Actually, it is about ontology, about existence or not existence. It is not just about being in general, but primarily about eternal well-being, meaning true ontology. It is not just about good or evil, about ethics, in other words, but ecology, because ecology also focuses on the sustainability, the eternal survival of the whole creation. Perhaps you have heard the term sustainability, which is used very often in the discussion about environmental crisis, which is another word to say, to discuss about the eternal survival of creation. How much time I have? Okay, I will.
You can. I will ask you, Nicholas, to come to the conclusions and to have
Yes.
20 or 30 minutes for discussion.
Okay. I will skip the part dealing with some patterns of eco-dogmatics, and I will go directly to how we can green our church from, let's say, theory to praxis. The first method, the first tool that we can use in order to green our churches, to green our parishes, to increase the awareness of the people is, of course, education, and especially ecotheological education. You all know that education in general is a very powerful tool to prepare societies to transform policies and change mentalities. The theological educators and the religious community leaders can and must play an essential role in preparing and supporting present and future generations to understand and cope with climate change. How this can be done? With educational and awareness activities, by preparing compulsory curricula for primary and secondary schools, university theological faculties, by integrating of ecotheological modules in already established and running academic, public, and parish activities, like themed days at public and Sunday schools, climate-driven excursions, visits to eco-friendly monastic communities, and many others. Understand, recognize the use credible information about climate change. We need to hear the voice of the science and be in close relations with science, to cooperate with scientists. Communicate about climate change in a meaningful way. Create inspiring, well-informed, responsible curricula that are more inclusive, open-ended, combining eco-theory with eco-praxis. Cultivate a certain eco-ethos. Adopt sustainable lifestyle, nature-based solutions to climate change, mandatory supply chains, due to diligence, and so on. I could perhaps present you, the discussion will give the opportunity to say a few words about what we are doing in Volos, in our context, where we are trying to green our parish and diocese with various activities. But also I would like to show also some practical tools that we can use by your parishes in Ukraine when the war will end, in order to rebuild your parishes and churches in a green way. Actions at the parish level include projects of recycling of paper, glass, metals, and chemical waste, saving on energy within ecclesiastical buildings through the necessary insulation, encouraging responsible use of water, encouraging less frequent use of motor vehicles. Actions at the diocesan level include finding ways of producing and using alternative forms of energy. Every metropolitan archdiocese or every diocese should examine land use, building investments within its influence, and ensure that they are used in a way that it is not that does not harm the environment. You can see also that Serbian Orthodox Church in Canada uses many tools in this direction. Find alternatives to the aerosol products we are using. Use paper products in place of styrofoam items. Purchase eggs in cardboard cartons and let your grocer know that you don't want to buy eggs packaged in styrofoam. Use clean liquids sold in spray bottles rather than in aerosol cans, and many other useful things that we can do in our local context. I will skip this part, and I would like to thank you by ending my presentation. I hope that was somehow useful for you in the context that you are living and the war that you are experiencing.